The Atlantic jet eases with whimsical breezes. P&A peaks, central U.S. coldness it seeks, and El Nino looms, bolder in summer, we assume. That's pretty much the rundown for the climatic indicators. We are going to be shifting into El Nino this summer, and it should become quite strong as we go into fall. Let's take a look at the current weather. Well, the weather map does certainly look spring-like. An active weather system down there in Texas, a southerly storm track, and this afternoon we have an enhanced risk for severe weather in Texas into northeastern Louisiana, and some severe weather expected mostly in the eastern part of Florida this afternoon. They've already got the severe watch box out for that part of the country. A cold Great Lakes high sinking down into the Midwest, filtering cool air into the central U.S., the Arctic, and even into Mississippi, where it's in the 50s this afternoon. There is a warm front just to the south, very moist tropical air flowing northward. You can see that onshore flow there on the Texas Gulf Coast, and the dry line pretty far out to the west, just west of Del Rio. And you can see that MCS moving into the Dallas-Fort Worth area and Oklahoma City. Let's take a look at the radar. Not a whole lot to look at this afternoon. This is all disorganized activity. A lot of it is elevated, especially up to the north. However, it is laying down a pretty good cold pool. We can see some of that right there. That's going to be the cold pool. And a lot of those cells moving on off to the east. But what we have to watch for as we record this, it's early afternoon, and there's an area that's devoid of precipitation, probably getting some heating, so we could see an increase in severe weather in that part of North Texas. Satellite is always a forecaster's best friend. The catch is you have to zoom in really tight to see what's going on. So we definitely have a couple of different air mass regimes. There's the cold pool. It extends actually well up into southwest Oklahoma and northwest Texas. The outflow boundary right here, some of it is in the form of a MCS through southeastern Oklahoma, and warm advection cells, pretty numerous in northeastern Texas. There's also a difference in cloud textures in the warm sector. If you look up to the north, we've got transverse stratocumulus. There's those bands right there. They're kind of at an angle to the low-level flow, kind of a combination of the cool easterly flow with the southerly flow aloft, and the bands kind of align in between as they roll up within that stable flow. And yes, in the lower part of the atmosphere it is stable. There is definitely instability just above that, but at the level where the stratocumulus and stratus bands are, it is relatively suppressed, so we get that kind of flat appearance to those cloud elements. Down to the south, though, we don't have cold air. We've got pretty good heating, and as a result, the clouds tend to form more into streets, and they have a more vertical appearance. So that explains the difference between what we have up here and down to the south, and there's a warm front in between. That's what we're going to have to look for on the surface chart, and that can be a focus for severe weather. Out to the west, a decrease in the low cloud field, and that gets into the air that's back behind the dry line. The dry line probably in this area right here. And of course we mentioned the warm front and the outflow boundary. And there's probably even a cold front somewhere in this area right there. So let's head to the surface chart, the small scale mesoanalysis. And you can see I zoomed in pretty tight there. A lot of thunderstorm activity across the Dallas-Fort Worth area, winds out of the north, and that outflow boundary is probably somewhat like that, and it looks like it trails off just south of Interstate 20 towards Abilene. The warm front, got to go down a little bit further south for that. So there we've got the boundaries around the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It looks like a secondary boundary out towards Longview and Tyler. The warm front, that's going to connect back up in this triple point south of Ranger and Eastland, and it looks like that trails south. And you can see the difference in the temperature between Austin Georgetown near 80 degrees, and Waco at about 65. So anywhere along that warm front could be an area of enhanced severe weather potential. And to track what it's going to do, theta E is a good product for that. Since the air mass north of the warm front is both dry and cool, that's going to really enhance the theta E gradient along that warm front. So if we step this forward, you can see a definite northward movement to that warm front. The high-resolution rapid refresh does have it stalling out around the Waco Temple area later this afternoon. So it's not clear whether that's actually going to happen, but this particular model thinks it will stall out there, and that probably will be a focus for severe weather, at least in this particular model solution. And here I've got the composite reflectivity and the updraft helicity. You can see how things develop. Lots of activity from Fort Worth southwest into that warmer air south of Eastland. And looks like a few strong cells out around Stephenville and tracking along that warm front in this particular model solution. And looks like a definite possibility of rotating storms around Waco and Temple and moving down into the Mahia and Hearn area. That's going to be southeast of Waco, and it does have a definite outflowish appearance, and that does raise the possibility for some wind damage, maybe some scattered reports during the early evening out there south of Palestine and south of Buffalo. And you can see some of this with the significant tornado parameter. I'm not really looking at exact values, but this boundary right there, because that does clue me in on what it's doing with the warm front. And looks like the better air mass is definitely in the Interstate 35 corridor south of DFW. Again, that's this particular solution. The National Severe Storms Laboratory is also running some convective allowing models. This is a 1830Z run. This particular run does develop cells east of Abilene this afternoon, and it tracks it right down that warm front. So again, similar to the high-resolution rapid refresh, it appears to be focusing on that area right there south of Dallas. And we can look at the updraft helicity as well to look for some of the rotating storms. So we're looking at Interstate 20 there, southwest of Fort Worth, around Stephenville. That would probably be the place to be if you were a storm chaser. And I can see some other faint corridors along that secondary boundary out there around Tyler as well. But this only goes up to 2130Z. So hopefully that gives you some good food for thought. I can definitely see some enhanced cumulus right there around Stephenville to Brownwood and some other towers south of Abilene. The air mass further to the east does look pretty stable. I'm not really sure whether the warm front is going to make it that far north, and on this animation it does appear stationary at this time. And it's worth pointing out that today is the 32nd anniversary of the Andover, Kansas tornado that was east of Wichita back in 1991. That tornado was rated F5. It killed 17, 13 of which were in a mobile home park. 46-mile path on that tornado, and that was right in here. Also, it's the anniversary of the Gainesville tornado 29 years ago. I remember Gene Roden was on that. And I'm not sure if this is an anniversary for any other tornadoes, but feel free to post in comments if you know anything. In the northeast, we do have some showers up there. Looks like a weak front moving through New York and Pennsylvania. We are expecting a wet weekend coming up as this system down there in the plains lifts northeastward. The visible satellite still shows an extensive cold air advection regime. You can see all that open cell cumulus across Quebec, all the way down into Ontario, and down into the Appalachians. And with that cold air advection, we have frost advisories in the Toronto area and across Lake Erie into the Cleveland region. In the southeastern U.S., it is unsettled. We've got showers and storms all the way up from Florida to the Carolinas, and those anvils definitely look sheared. That'll take you in for a better look at them. Definitely some sea breeze action involved, and those anvils extending way out to the east, getting carried rapidly off to the east, so some good bulk shears involved, and that helps prolong storm longevity. There's some of those showers going on in the Carolinas. Further up north, cloudy. This looks like a lot of cirrus and shower debris. Big Rig Steve is along Interstate 75. Let's take a look from his vantage point. And he's out there in the mountains. It looks like he's heading south. And I do use his videos because he's got a great view of the sky, usually. And he gave us blanket permission to use his content, and I very much appreciate that. Anyway, very scenic there, and the leaves are definitely coming out, looking a lot like summer there. Well, not much more to talk about as far as Texas goes. We've already covered that in detail, and we'll come back to that at the end, so we have a new update. But that outflow boundary continuing to push south of Interstate 20, and we're watching that area around Hillsboro, Waco, back towards Brownwood. In the northern plains, Colorado getting a little bit of a break there from all the rain. Yesterday, Pueblo, located right here, had 1.40 inches of rain, breaking the old record of 0.68 for the date, and they've had almost 2 inches with this particular storm. And I saw something about a tornado sighting. I don't know if that was this morning or yesterday. That was in the Denver area at the airport. Yeah, that was yesterday evening, about 4 p.m., somewhere around there, Mountain Time. Tornado sighted there at Denver International Airport and encoded by the air traffic controllers. And way out east, very cool. Indiana was down to 28 degrees at Fort Wayne, setting a record for the date. In the southwestern U.S., a lot of clear skies, but Sacramento already talking about heat. They will be seeing 80s and maybe some 90s out there over the weekend, and that will be followed later in the week with quite a bit of rain, especially in the coastal areas of California and south central California as well. And looking pretty quiet as well in the northwestern U.S. under a big ridge, so we're mostly just seeing the snowpack in the higher elevations. And there's that high-pressure ridge from the Great Basin out towards the Pacific. We head up north into Alaska. Occluded system moving into southeastern Alaska, bringing a lot of rain to Juneau and Ketchikan. That occlusion rapidly making its way inland, heading into northern British Columbia. But let's check out the radar. And this is an 18-hour loop that starts overnight. Huge rain shield coming up with the warm air advection flowing up into southeastern Alaska. And then we can see evidence of that calm ahead, that occlusion moving inland right there. Then we get the wraparound, the cold conveyor belt, and some of the moisture flowing around. And then that's followed by convection as the cold air advection builds in. And this afternoon, the cold spring continues. Anchorage continuing a 188-day streak of sub-freezing overnight lows, the third longest on record. Only 1956 and 1972 have been more severe. Cold in the north, Dead Horse, which I believe is that station right there, near Prudhoe Bay, had a high of -3 yesterday. That broke the record for the date. And the previous day, that was, I think, Monday, -24 Fahrenheit. And that broke the record of -19. Some news coming out of Anchorage that the Alaska Weather TV program has been canceled. It will be off the air starting July 1st. So that's kind of unfortunate news. That program has been around for something like 30 or 40 years. And it's been kind of the northern counterpart to the old AM weather series that we used to have on PBS. Then heading into Canada, the cold weather continues up there in the Canadian High Arctic, -11 to -15 at Resolute and Grise Fiord. Then dropping back south into the inhabited regions, heavily inhabited regions. The prairies looking rather cool with cold air flowing south. But out there in British Columbia, we did have some very warm weather. I saw some reports of 72 degrees at Ashcroft, British Columbia, 68 at Osoyoos, and 67 at Kamloops. And it's expected some of those areas will be close to 80 degrees later this week. And we have a heat wave going on in southern Spain and Portugal. You can see all these temperatures up into the 90s. 99 degrees at Seville And they're expecting it to be worse for tomorrow. And those could break the records for April in Spain and possibly the April record for Europe. So we'll see what happens with that. Down south in Morocco, hundreds showing up at Casablanca and Marrakesh. So let's take a look at the national forecast with our friendly NAM model. You can follow along down here to get the time. That's going to be UTC, so you're going to have to subtract 5, 6, 7, or 8 hours to get your local time. So we have that MCS there in Texas moving into the deeper moisture. This is a classic northwesterly flow setup. And we've got that MCS moving through much of Texas overnight and down towards the Gulf Coast tomorrow morning. And then as we go into the daytime hours tomorrow, big MCS moving through Mississippi and Alabama. And we see some troughing out in this area right here. That's going to be that baroclinic system, which will be coming together and moving up to the northeastern U.S. Here comes another Alberta Clipper out of Canada. Very disturbed area of precipitation, some snow mixed in, and very gusty northerly winds in the high plains. So this is going to be tomorrow evening. MCS moving through Georgia into the Carolinas. A new wave moving through the central plains and diving south, very strong cold air advection blowing through Colorado. Some snow back in there. So the cold front is going to be about like that. Maybe a warm front in here, maybe I think about like that in Oklahoma. And our system up there in the eastern U.S., I think that's going to be an occlusion. The main baroclinic zone is way down here. And that's going to be the area of the best baroclinic support in the western Carolinas. So we're talking about early on Friday. Let's go through the daytime on Friday, and hopefully we'll have you here on that day for the Forecast Lab show. So we're going to be looking at a situation about like this. Big system moving into the northeastern U.S., another plunging cold air mass into the central plains and the southern plains, and a lot of that's going to be in the form of rain. Then we're going to be dealing with another MCS on Friday night. Best severe potential probably down in the hill country. The activity further north definitely looks a little bit more disorganized. And that brings us to the end of the sequence. Improving conditions across much of the Great Plains. A cold core system across Texas, so maybe some lingering showers in that area. And unsettled in the Great Lakes area. And we check back in on our situation in Texas, and indeed, we do have deep convection forming along that boundary. There's one good cell there. That's going to be southeast of Abilene, and we're going to watch for additional convection down that boundary. And the latest full forecast we have is from 1900Z, and you can see that's fairly close to the convection we have developing, and the bulk of it appears to be running through the Hillsboro-Waco area and right down there towards Buffalo and Hearn. And there's one of the indicators for updraft helicity, kind of a little bullseye along that storm as it moves north of Waco. So that'll be the best potential through 8 p.m. There's the 0 through 2 kilometer helicity paintball. And that's a pretty firm agreement right there, that little corridor from Eastland Ranger to West and Waco. So I hope that gives you some interesting stuff to look at. We'll see you back here for another edition of Forecast Lab on Friday. Hope you have a great Wednesday evening. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.